Charles. Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. I am joined by Jeff Ray from TTI. Jeff, last time we talked, it was on the Eric Miskell show, and you gave a great deal of insight into where we were. We were supposed to meet at Electronica, and we missed each other there. It was a very busy show. There's an interesting show, actually. So let's start with a little bit of a wrap up from 2024, and then we'll dig into some of the trends we're seeing develop for 2025. Few words to sum up 2024.
Well, it's a family show, so I'll be selective on which words, but 2024 has been a struggle. I think that we're better positioned going out of 2024, certainly, but it's been a tough year. A word that I use most often is disentangle.
Okay.
And that's where we've been. We've been disentangling ourselves from an inventory supply chain scenario that was built on quite a bit of exuberance generated, post-COVID. And I'm happy to say that while not completely disentangled, we're much better positioned as an industry going into 2025 than we were coming into 2024.
Yeah, and was a lot of that entanglement, was a lot of that inventory bubble, or kind of bullwhip effect, or how do you see
Well,
it?
I think that the inventory certainly is the most pronounced challenge that we had, and perhaps the inventory was correct had there been a stronger pull market. So I don't think that the inventory is the exclusive challenge. It's the challenge really is where are the up markets?
Yeah.
What had been the previous strong markets are starting to plateau a little bit. Now, while they're still up over previous years, I don't expect applications, even data centers, aerospace and defense, which have been two of the stronger segments going in the past. While they'll be strong, they're just, for it to provide growth over 2024, it has to increase. And so I think what people have gotten, disillusioned as there's going to be this exponential 30% quarter on quarter growth for quarters on quarters on quarters. And I think that is, I think that's a little bit of a reckless mindset. I don't believe that that's going to happen in 2025 at all. And if it does, it will not be because of the end markets driving that activity. I think it may be more generated on order book management around fluctuation of lead times and cash flows that are kind of driving some of that noise in the market, not necessarily the fundamentals that a stronger end market would provide.
Yeah, we'll come on to order management and the whole kind of prediction of demand, because I think that's a real issue the supply chains had. And as you say, I think it was because people are always excited by growth, and they always think, this is the new world that we'll have forever. But this last quarter was punctuated by the US election. The results are in, as we know. There's been some saber rattling in terms of protectionism and tariffs, some of which seems to be to get people to the negotiating table. How do you see the fallout from that? And is it a question of waiting for the first 100 days to see what happens, or is it do we have visibility already, do you think?
Well, I don't know that I could say that we have visibility with any level of confidence. So if the options are, let's see what the first 100 days are, or articulate the vision that you have confidence in right now, I'd say let's wait for the first 100 days.
Yeah.
I do think that some of the saber rattling, as you suggested, will certainly change the dynamics between not just the U.S. and China, but U.S. and other countries as well. And so there will be a different landscape relative to the competitiveness of the U.S.-based manufacturers, goods and things of that nature. My concern is that we may be fighting some battles that we can't win, specific to rare earth elements and things of that nature. We
Yeah,
just don't have, it was at one point in time, we were battling soybeans versus semiconductors.
yeah,
And you can make a lot of distinction between what those products go into, and they're both very critical to the supply chains for those end
yeah.
products. But the undeniable issue is rare earth elements. And I think that's a position that we need to be a little bit more mindful and careful of.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You can't dig up what isn't there, and soybeans you can plant, semiconductor plants you can build, and we know that takes time. And unfortunately, what they are building is a long way behind. But rare earth stuff is somewhat different. We were both in Europe at the end of the year. I thought it was a really interesting show. It was probably the busiest Electronica I remember for quite some time in terms of footfall, but it's not a optimistic market there. I would say whatever problems there are in the US have been worse in Europe. Would that resonate with you?
Absolutely. A colleague of mine has an expression that when he retires, I'm going to brand as my own, but it goes that let's not mistake optimism for being naive.
Yeah.
And so while I did see a lot of optimism at Electronica, much more than I anticipated, to be honest,
Me
I
too.
thought it was going to be a lot of doom and gloom. It's nice to say optimism, but I think if we were kind and told people what they really needed to hear and understand what they needed to understand, they're a little bit naive
Yeah.
in the outlook of 2025 relative to the tone that was shared at Electronica.
Yeah, I certainly spoke to a lot of EMS leadership, from top down, most of the top 10 in Europe. I spoke to their CEOs, and a lot of their optimism was based around 2026 rather than 2025.
Yeah,
And,
maybe.
I think we all know the underlying trends in electronic manufacturing are good. And it's a question of seeing this inventory bubble work its way through, see interest rates come down, and see some of the market shift. So looking at that, do we see 2025 as a similar year to 2024, but one that, we're perhaps a little bit better prepared for? Or do you see some shift in 2025? What are the key trends you're kind of basing your business planning on?
Well, I wish you'd asked me a more uplifting question.
Or
The
an easier
for
question?
one, I'd go back and maybe challenge some of the 2026 optimism and introduce the word complacency. I think the again comment about the overall European region is I'm not certain that when the business does come back together at whatever that
Mm.
looks like, and it may look just like this, by the way, outside some of the sluggishness around the inventory. I think that there could be some migration out of certainly out of the DAC region or Central Europe
Mm.
into Eastern Europe. I think it goes out of Eastern Europe, maybe into North Africa. I think maybe it goes
Yeah,
out of Europe and stays in China. I think it's really difficult to understand how dependent particularly the German industrial market was on the China market.
yeah,
And that some of that business may not ever come back
yeah,
as China for China continues to evolve. My concerns would be if we automatically assume that the market, when it comes back, is going to come back in like kind. I think that may be an overstep.
yeah,
What do I see
yeah.
for 2025? I think this is what 2025 looks like. I don't
Right.
aspire, there are people that can continue to say it's going to be in the back half. The
Mm.
same people that said that in 2024 and in 2023, and
Yeah,
eventually, I guess they'll be right. But I just really don't see it at all in 2025. Typically
yeah.
Q1 is
Mm.
the strongest quarter. And so if you're going to ship that product, it has to be a part of your order book today. It'd be really difficult to go into to Q1 2025 with bookings that will ship inside of
Yeah.
of Q1. So we kind of know what Q1 is going to look like. And again,
Yeah.
traditionally, it's the longest, excuse me, the strongest quarter. And then there's build in Q2. I've seen a lot of projections where Q3 is going to be the strongest quarter. And,
Hmm.
history would say that's a really difficult time to be the
Yeah.
strongest quarter with vacation schedules and
Yeah.
shutdowns and things. And so I think it's just a mathematical stretch to get from where
Yeah.
you are today to where you necessarily want to be. But I just don't see the fundamentals of what is actually
Yeah.
going to drive this. And removing
Yeah.
inventory by itself will help. I just don't see that being the catalyst to quarter on quarter growth inside of 2025. I don't necessarily think it's going to get any worse, but
No.
I am concerned of people that are building in back half recovery without any legitimate fundamentals or funnel
Yeah.
that would support it.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, isn't it? It's it's a sense that people feel that there's improvement on the horizon. They don't know where it is. They may be looking to, changes in rates from the Fed or the European Central Bank, or wherever to improve or stimulate consumer spending. Um, but yeah, there is that timing thing. But as you say, the people that say the next quarter is going to be better are eventually going to be right, because eventually
Yeah.
there will be a better quarter, but that doesn't help anybody in terms of business planning. Do you see differences between different markets? And we've talked about the US and the European market. Do you see change there? And do you see like big improvement in other new markets like India, for example?
Well, definitely see India being a low cost area, a beneficiary of the programs moving out of China.
Mm,
I think the challenge that we have, whether it's India as a whole or even markets such as Vietnam as an example,
mm,
while the economy is right, the infrastructure is not quite as developed as you may see in Southeast Asia. It may go into Thailand or into Malaysia,
yeah.
where it looks like and feels like it should go into Vietnam. I'd say I would make the same comment about India. Now, while there will be lots of business and growth over, market over market, but if it's a program that's moved from one region to another, that's not necessarily growth overall, while
No.
it's probably more risk. Now, there could be growth opportunities if you're not incumbent to the business as it transferred out of those regions. But typically, if we were just to add up the sum total, we may see some migration, and I certainly think that India will be the largest beneficiary of that migration. I think as
Yeah.
companies understand just getting product, unless you have distribution centers already established into India, it's a very different market to ship into as opposed to the markets that we're a little bit more developed and familiar with doing business in.
Yeah, and I think if you look at India, and you think about what happened in China in the last 20 years, you'd expect it to be more compressed. I'm kind of curious with the size of the potential consumer market in India, how quickly we see an India for India strategy and how quickly we see things develop there, rather than India becoming that kind of factory for the world model that was so strong in China. I think there are some real fundamental differences between India and China in terms of competitiveness, which probably tell us why India hasn't competed in the last 10 years, um, and now geopolitics is maybe pushing it more to the fore.
I think you make some strong points there that they will incorporate some of the opportunities that have been generated from other regions, but they'll have
Mm,
their own spin on it and protect some of their own interests as they develop part of the infrastructure. Whether it'll be India for India first, I don't know if I'd go that far, but I think it'd be in that direction.
yeah,
That would be.
yeah. And do you see a bit of a manufacturing renaissance in in the USA? And how do you see that relationship with the near neighbors, North and South?
That's a good question, and the easy answer should be yes. It's unquestioned that that's where it would go. But when you look at access to personnel, when you look at from a capacity standpoint, I'm not sure that it actually lands in the U.S. There will be some, I mean,
Hmm.
some, but
Yeah,
is it meaningful? And I think the answer is no. In large part of personnel, facilities themselves, the ability to expand facilities, the ability to get equipment, all the things that you would need to be successful in that transition of bring back, and not to mention just straight cost. Now,
yeah,
will some of these tariffs, level that playing field? Potentially so, but not necessarily sold outside of mandated or regulated
yeah,
verticals that have to be built here.
yeah,
Will there be an increase in US based manufacturing or components?
yeah. What about the near neighbors? Do you think, given Trudeau's already been to Mar-a-Lago and Mexico are making the right noise, is it a question of secure the borders and there won't be tariffs, and it's good times ahead, particularly for Mexico as a large low-cost manufacturing base with a decent talent pool? Or do you think it's one to watch and again see what happens in those first 100 days?
Yeah, as you were asking the question, I thought the easiest thing is to defer to the second half.
Yeah,
I could see maybe the comments you were making about Mexico being maybe easier to implement and
mm,
accelerate. But in the end, I think that we'll know more as we know more, and I'd be a little maybe hesitant to make comments at this point of how it would
yeah,
actually play out. And
yeah,
to some degree, maybe because I'm just not quite clear on the the causal factors of what's driving this next level of tariff. The fundamentals I understand, but
yeah.
there's if it's saber rattling or actually foundation based, I'm just not quite sure at this point.
No, Jeff, it's a challenge to understand the political. It's hard enough for us to understand our lane, which is where are all the components going. It's another thing to understand where all the political decisions come from and what influences them. So that's definitely a wait and see thing. You mentioned naivety. You mentioned over exuberance. Those are all things we've seen in the supply chain recently, and they speak a little bit to understanding how we predict and we project and we communicate demand up and down the supply chain. That's definitely been a problem for as long as I can remember. There was a massive overhang from the tech wreck uh, in 2000, and I'm surprised we've had such a big overhang again. It's like, will we ever learn? My question is probably, will we ever learn? Your answer is probably no. But what tools can we put in place to make that better? How can we collaborate and partner up and down the supply chain to actually try and smooth out some of these bumps so we're not creating artificial demand?
Right. Well, I think so from a TTI perspective, so my answer is going to be, interconnect passive electromechanical product specific. I think there's two worlds there. And a lot of it is how the manufacturers utilize lead time and factory capacity to punch into the market.
Mm,
And if you're in a product commodity that is more design specific, say like interconnect, you may have a different point of view as for a commodity based, MLCC or resistor chip manufacturer that's looking at market growth and market share a little bit differently, just having product available and
yeah.
using necessarily price and terms to push product off the shelf. So I think the answer to both is really a little bit of better understanding of big data and true demand. And I think the interconnect manufacturers typically do a better job of understanding what the true demand is for the programs that they're connected to. I think the passive suppliers and discrete semiconductor suppliers tend to think that any upside in the market is theirs. And so let's just say that, for example, there's 5% upside. And then you'll have several manufacturers that will produce, an 8% year-on-year growth. Well, somebody's not going to be right. And that's what happens with this inventory. And eventually, at some point in time, there's downward pressure on the resales of the product because there's too much inventory, and you start to see those ebbs and flows again. That's what I think it will happen a little bit if there is an uptick in the back half of 2025. I tell people I think it'll be more manufactured, meaning by our behavior, than it will
Yeah.
be connected to a manufacturer because there's real true demand.
Right.
I don't believe today that we're seeing full forecasts from our customers. Part of it, they'd have to take a reserve, and financially, with lead times as low as they are, product is available. They don't really probably feel the need to show their entire order book because there's no real risk necessarily
Yeah.
in the back half of that. So let's just say, for example, they're showing us 15 weeks of demand, although they may have 20 or 25 weeks of forecasts from their customers. No reason to show us that extra demand right now. But as the market starts to heat up, and unfortunately it doesn't heat up uniformly, you'll start to see challenges. And as lead times would pick out a little bit, then now the customer is going to have to show you a little bit more demand. It's not any real demand. They already had that demand. They just weren't really showing it to you. But now, as a distributor, then we're going to cover that new forecast with orders onto the suppliers. Lead time ticks out a little bit more, and then you've seen the movie
Yeah.
before. Everybody jumps in and repositions their inventory. In some cases, customers will then go back and broad brush product categories across and say, now I want you to go out and cover, 26 weeks worth of demand. And now we've got, I won't say allocation, but certainly some constrained products. When there was no more real demand out there at the end of that process than there was to begin with, the visibility has changed and the paranoia has crept up a little bit. So I think there could be some of that, but I don't see that as true demand or real demand. And until we get a better handle on what the real demand is, and maybe using AI is a good example of some of the technologies that can come into play to get a better handle of that. Because as a distributor, you always want to be, one step ahead of the market to have inventory in position for that upside, not necessarily be too early with it. And it really is difficult if you're too late. So timing is really critical, and being able to bring some of those forecasts in, sanitize them, and then put them in real time phases. I think that's how we get better. But let's just admit that there's always going to be some gamesmanship. There's always going to be some, I don't mean greed in a bad way, but greed in a good way, of trying to get ahead and take advantage of an inventory position to better service your customers. And when that additive total is greater than the demand, you're just going to have another build. I think it'll happen again in 2025 or the first part of 2026. I just don't think it'll be anywhere near as significant as it was coming out of the last peak.
Yeah. I think actually, removing some of the drama would be nice. But what we're seeing is a lot of those decisions and a lot of what's going on in the supply chain driven by those different emotions, whether they are exuberance, whether they are blind optimism, naivety, or whatever else. Those aren't the things that we would traditionally associate with good data-driven communication up and down the supply chain. And maybe AI, which is clearly less emotional and hopefully more logical and more rational, may be part of that process of helping, because there is a ridiculously large amount of data out there. But as you say, I think the other challenge is where do you get that data from, and who's prepared to share that data? Because if people only want to show you the data that kind of drives a particular result for them, rather than an open and full communication and a full collaboration of data, then you're not going to be able to improve those results.
Now, while forecast and lead time are chief among the components that go into the algorithm that drive our systems or any distributor system, it's not the only data points that are inputted into that calculation. But today, if you don't necessarily believe that all the forecasts are accurate and you have question marks about the accuracy of a trailing indicator, lead time,
Mm.
you would suggest that it's always right for, errors when you have two inaccurate components
Yeah,
going into the formula, which are two of the most critical things that are usually, they're directionally correct, but
yeah,
they can
yeah.
still be a challenge.
Yeah, they're certainly not particularly accurate from a scale point of view. As you say, they're a trend indicator rather than anything else. So when a company like TTI is in a position where the market looks like it's fairly static over the next 12 months or so, how do you plan your business? Is it an opportunity to look internally and do a much better job with resources, systems, developing new tools, new programs? Is it an opportunity to maybe do some of that correction in terms of global footprint? What does 2025 look like for your business
Well, I
internally?
think the answer is yes to a lot of those things. TTI include, like all companies, we were up 30% and built 30% more in cost. And
Yeah,
now you have a
a
cost
correction.
issue like suppliers, customers, and other distributors have. Some more going to be more pronounced than others, but that's the first issue is, are you going to be able to right size your business for the market that's in front? Are you
Mm,
going to be able to sharpen your strategy to execute in the verticals or sub-vertical applications where you have a meaningful, value proposition and execute along those lines? I think those are some of the challenges that all companies are going to have, and TTI
mm.
will be amongst those companies. So we'll have to make sure that that we're executing in those areas. It's
Yeah,
just not been an easy budgeting process that I can tell you.
yeah.
And so we'll be mindful of headcount additions, but you have to
Mm.
continue to invest as a
Yeah,
distributor. Our capacity is the number of people we have talking to customers. That is, as a
yeah,
distributor, that's our capacity. And so
yeah,
you want to be careful that you don't reduce your capacity too much because there still is a market. We don't have
yeah,
100% market share, so there's always shared to
yeah,
gain, and particularly
yeah,
in newer commodities or verticals that you're after. And so I think that is the message that I would share is not being complacent, not making a knot to hang on. This will
mm,
get better. I don't think it's going to get exponentially better or get better anytime soon. But work on the fundamentals that you have control over today. And when the
yeah,
market does come back out, you have to be better positioned for what that market is going to look like, and
yeah,
using this time to make sure that you're developing um, that strategy, because when the market does heat back up, that is going to be way too late to
yeah,
start implementing some of the changes and the migrations from resources and inventories that exist today.
yeah, yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. Maintaining stuff that's customer facing that allows you to listen to the voice of the customer and understand what's changing in their expectations and their demand, and be able to respond to that is really important. So yeah, I think there's definitely a requirement to right size the business and to plan for 2025, and it sounds like it's planning for a market that isn't dissimilar to 2024, but is perhaps increasingly agile. We definitely need more agility in the marketplace. We need more data. We need a better understanding of what collaboration with our customer looks like, because we've just gone through a period where everything's been driven by froth. So it's been a it's been a challenging time. Jeff, thanks so much for your time. Really interesting to talk to you. Interested to see what does happen in 2025. I think having spoken to a large number of people in the last couple of months about what they're expecting for 2025, your estimations are in line. So I don't think any
Okay.
surprises there. All the best for the holidays. I hope you have a great Christmas, and I wish you all the best in the new year with realism rather than naivety. And look forward to chatting to you then. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.